Yeltsin checks in with Bill Clinton from Moscow as the transition of power begins. Violence on this nation's highways, it's a growing problem. And Alan Page, a fearsome football star, now a judicial source.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting tonight from NBC News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Bill Clinton has been president-elect for only 2 days now, but already he's being forced to deal with major developments on several fronts. Boris Yeltsin, the beleaguered president of Russia, was on the telephone today. The Bush administration has threatened to start a trade war with Europe, and then, of course, there's the question of who Clinton wants to take to Washington and what he'll do when he gets there. NBC's Andrea Mitchell tonight in Little Rock. Andrea?
Tom, there was no shortage of advice for Bill Clinton as he decides what kind of White House he wants to run. Clinton was a study in transition today, attending a meeting on the state budget, reading briefing books on how to set up a national government. While he's made no final decisions about who will head his transition, longtime friend Bruce Lindsay will be a major player. One of Clinton's first problems may be an escalating trade war with Europe. The U.S. just raised tariffs on some European products 200%.
I don't want to comment on it. I'll review it. We got one president. He has to make those decisions. I don't want to get in the way of them.
What your next steps are? What are your next steps?
Well, we're putting together the transition team, and I'm reading volumes of stuff on things that I need to decide on. I'll be doing it.
Clinton did talk today to foreign leaders.
They were all very, brief. Look forward to working with you. Conversations. I talked to Mr. Yeltsin, President Salinas, Prime Minister Mulroney, Prime Minister Major.
True to his vow to include Al Gore in everything, Gore has stayed in Little Rock for transition meetings rather than going home to Tennessee.
We'll work through today and through tomorrow. Then we'll probably take the weekend off and hit it back Monday morning.
Another advisor said his farewells today. Clinton's top political strategist, James Carville, joked that he would not trust a government that would hire him. That makes him the only Clinton aide not angling for a top job.
Hey, guys, they didn't give me steak. I don't know what to say. I quit.
Clinton's staff wants him to keep as focused during the transition as he was during the campaign. NBC News has obtained a Clinton staff memo which he has not seen. It advises him to focus on policy more than personnel, claim a legislative mandate, use executive orders to create a perception of action, pick legislative priorities that will pass quickly and don't waste time on those that won't, claim credit but don't waste energy on legislation that will pass anyway, including Democratic priorities such as family leave, the Abortion Rights Act, and campaign finance reform. Clinton has also been told to learn from Jimmy Carter's mistakes.
You have to avoid coming up with too ambitious a legislative agenda which throws things on the Congress which they can't properly digest and therefore gets your presidency off to a rocky start.
Clinton met at length today with the man who helped him choose Al Gore, former Carter official Warren Christopher. Christopher will likely have a major job, possibly head of transition. Tom?
Thank you, Andrea. John Cochran is at the White House tonight, as you can see, where President Bush today was at once exercising power and also mentally packing up for the move out. John, what's the latest in the trade business?
Tom, the president told his staff today to accept the fact that the focus now is all on Bill Clinton.
Go next month, but he sees no reason to go now.
I have no plans to go to Moscow.
But Bush is still responsible for foreign policy, and he can still make decisions affecting our lives, such as today's go-ahead for new tariffs on European imports that could triple the prices Americans pay for a French Chablis or a German Riesling. Bush hopes to pressure Europeans into lowering their tariffs on American farm products. It's big news in Europe.
A few moments ago, I was informed that the United States have just announced retaliatory action.
But it is a very serious matter indeed. And any trade war between Europe and America would seriously damage the world economy.
No, we're not engaged in a trade war just because we got some tough fighters over here on our side. But
other than the trade talks, Bush has few decisions to make. He has already refused to sign a tax bill meant to help inner cities like South Central Los Angeles. Find money for urban programs. But Bush told an aide, Robert Zoellick, to help Clinton in the transition of power. Aides say Bush is not angry at Clinton, but there is anger at Ross Perot for his attacks on Bush, at retired Admiral William Crowell for supporting Clinton, and at Iran-Contra prosecutor Lawrence Walsh for what the White House claims is a witch hunt that hurt Bush in the election. Some top Republicans are urging Bush to retaliate by pardoning former Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger and other Iran-Contra defendants.
The frustration in this White House is evident when the most animated conversations are about pardons instead of legislative or foreign policy initiatives. Tom?
Thank you, John Cochran. Foreign policy, of course, is more than a phrase. These days it translates into trouble, hotspots in too many places around the globe. We've asked NBC's Garrick Utley tonight to take us through the many challenges. Garrick?
Tom, Bill Clinton has had virtually no experience in international affairs. In fact, he ignored the subject for most of his campaign. He cannot ignore it now.
When Clinton spoke with Boris Yeltsin today, Russia's urgent need for help was clear. The Russian economy is ready to collapse under runaway inflation. Democracy is at risk. What does Clinton do? And then there is the agony of Bosnia. As a candidate, Clinton early on called for tougher action to stop Serbian ethnic cleansing. But he has given no indication that as president he would commit American troops there. In the Middle East, too, there are familiar dangers. Saddam Hussein celebrated George Bush's defeat. Will he create an incident to test a young, fresh American president? The real challenge in the Persian Gulf may come not from Iraq, but the growing military power of Iran. And today, Iran's spiritual leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warned Clinton not to make human rights an issue with his country. And then there are the new issues and challenges Clinton will face. Those close to him expect human rights, stopping the spread of nuclear weapons, and trade to be high on his agenda. In Asia, Clinton has denounced China's human rights violations, but China is on its way to becoming a major economic and trading partner of the future. For Bill Clinton, a tough call between principle and pragmatism. In China and elsewhere, the Clinton administration's foreign policy will be increasingly economic policy. Today, there were warnings of a trade war with Europe. In the new year, the free trade agreement with Mexico, negotiated by George Bush, will be voted on by a Democratic Congress. Will the Democratic president push hard for its passage? Zbigniew Brzezinski was the national security advisor of the last Democratic president, Jimmy Carter.
But if he doesn't really perform effectively on the domestic front, his international credibility is not going to be very high. Neither will America's. And as a consequence, his capacity for global leadership will be undermined.
In short, what we will see under President Clinton will be a merging of foreign and domestic concerns. The two can no longer be totally separated as national security becomes economic security. Tom?
Thank you, Gary. And tonight, kids. We have a disturbing story out of California. Diana Karecki, and how the number of children killed by their parents is now skyrocketing. That story when Nightly News continues. An unusual warning today from the American Automobile Association. Drivers should stay away from Interstate Highway 295, that's the bypass around Jacksonville, Florida. Since June, that road has become a highway from hell. But it's not a problem just in Florida, it turns out, and we have more now from NBC's Robert Hager.
There have been 36 cases of vehicles hit by bullets or thrown chunks of concrete. In July, the driver of this car was killed. 3 weeks later, a gunshot pierced the window of Deborah Lewis's car. She was hit in the jaw. A month later, Gary Sizemore was shot at.
And I just kept getting hit. It just kept hitting me. Boom, 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 just like that.
I-295 is the normal north-south route through Jacksonville for most motorists, avoiding downtown traffic. But today, AAA advised its members not to use it at all, and to use caution on I-95 through Jacksonville at night. Police had already beefed up patrols. Now Florida's National Guard is being asked to help.
The Florida case is only the latest in what authorities call a rising tide of highway violence across this country and in Canada as well.
In New Jersey today, the body of a 3-year-old was found. She and her mother kidnapped in a carjacking. The mother's still missing. In Los Angeles this fall, a car shot at on the Santa Monica Freeway. A window blown out. In Oakland Park, Florida, a motorist shot and killed after an argument in a traffic jam. A cameraman in Miami got this picture of an angry motorist with a pistol getting in his car. A consultant on terrorism, Louis Mizell, keeps a data bank on highway violence.
In the last 12 months, my company has recorded over 20,000 rapes, robberies, kidnappings, and murders on the nation's highways. And scores of these incidents include snipings and rock-throwing incidents, just like we're seeing in Jacksonville today.
In Canada, there have been 5 truckers shot at recently on a highway outside London, Ontario.
I mean, I just couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, it was such a shock. You know, why would anybody do something like this?
Why? Tonight, that's what authorities everywhere are asking, and motorists as well. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
There's a new problem tonight for motorists in cities with the dirtiest, most unhealthy air. The Environmental Protection Agency announced very tough auto emission tests. The EPA ordered 181 cities to reduce pollution by going under the hood of each car to check for gas vapor leaks. These extensive tests will take about 10 minutes, not the current 10 seconds for tailpipe emissions. It's estimated that 1 in 5 cars will fail the new testing in those cities where their concerns are most keenly felt. The rules will not take effect until 1996. The children of Los Angeles County, a report out today says that for many, family life is a nightmare. Beatings, sexual abuse, and more children now are being murdered at home. NBC's Diana Karicki.
Edward Saavedra, charged with the murder of his 3-month-old son. The mother, Elizabeth Madrid, charged with abuse of the child. A tragedy in the barrio.
Yes, our baby stopped breathing. Okay, ma'am? Yes. Is he conscious? No, he's not.
Doctors found the baby brain dead from a severe beating.
There's hemorrhages in the brain. There's hemorrhages in the eyes. There's bruises in the head, in the face, in the abdomen.
Today's report shows that in L.A. County, the number of children killed by their parents or caretakers has hit an all-time high. 61 murders last year, up 33% in 1 year, and nearly 3/4 of the victims under the age of 2.
We are not finding these children soon enough. You don't have much time to find a child who is 1 year or 2 years old.
What this study points out is that there aren't nearly enough social services for children. What services there are overwhelmed, and often it's the tiniest victims who are overlooked. The Plaza Community Center is one of the few to provide parenting classes for mothers who've been heavy users of drugs or alcohol. According to the report, the common denominator among parents who've killed their kids.
You know, you find a lot of answers here, and it helps you, you know.
But L.A. County is so strapped for funds, this program may have to shut down. And the report says a weak economy makes parents more likely to abuse or even kill their kids.
We're not making any attempt to change people. We're just punishing.
Most developed countries send a social worker to visit the home of every newborn child, rich or poor. The exceptions? South Africa and the United States. Diana Karicki, NBC News, Los Angeles.
In a moment, what the owners of small business in this country want from Bill Clinton. America Close Up tonight. Bill Clinton will have no shortage, of course, of people knocking on his door asking for help as he gets to work on the economy. And small business owners are no exception. They especially want relief from the high rates that they're paying on government loans. NBC's chief economics correspondent Irving R. Levine begins his report tonight in Hauppauge, New York.
Carmen Chappelle, like 4,000 other small business owners, took out a government loan at high interest rates years ago. Now rates are low. She wants to refinance. But if she does, she must pay a huge penalty, a penalty imposed by the government.
It's ironic to me that the same government that is lowering the interest rates to enhance the economy is the same government that is penalizing the small business people and not enabling us to refinance our loans.
Carmen Chappelle's loan was for $115,000 at 12%. Now she could get a bank loan at 7% and would save $400 a month in payments. But the U.S. Treasury would hit her with a $30,000 prepayment penalty.
If I were paying less, I would have more money to use for salaries to hire people, and those people in turn would be paying taxes, and they would not be unemployed.
The loan agreements with the Small Business Administration, the SBA, do contain a penalty clause. Still, it came as a belated shock to Gerald Goldberg, who rents out party equipment.
I'd never heard of a prepayment penalty in all the many loans that I've taken out prior to this. It just never dawned on me that there would be such a provision.
The SBA is willing to forego the prepayment penalties, but the Treasury Department says no. It doesn't want to lose the interest payments. NBC News has learned that the head of the SBA, Patricia Saiki, personally appealed to Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady on several occasions, but was turned down. Nevertheless, on U.S. loans to foreign countries, including Israel, Turkey, and Greece, Treasury has in recent years forgiven prepayment penalties much bigger than those involved in the SBA loans. Prepayment by people like print shop owner Patricia Brokes would mean no loss of principal for the U.S. Treasury and would remove a huge burden from borrowers.
At some point, I would like to turn the business over to my children, and unable to do that because of the penalty on the Small Business Administration loan.
Some members of Congress want to force Treasury's hand through legislation next year.
80% of the new jobs created in 1992 will be from small business, and the prepayment schedule of this kind is absolutely outrageous. Critics say that the Treasury's prepayment penalty amounts to loan sharking, but the Treasury says that a deal is a deal. And even though eliminating the penalty could help the economy, Treasury is refusing to budge. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
A top Clinton economic advisor told NBC News that Clinton could very well reverse the current Treasury policy on small business loans in an effort to stimulate job growth and, of course, to boost the economy. Here's a quick check now of some of today's other news. Bobby Fischer, the comeback kid in big-time chess in Yugoslavia. Fischer won his match with Boris Spassky 10-5, and so he collects more than $3 million. And this is chess, folks. In New Jersey, the family of the late Rose Cipollone, a smoker, dropped its 10-year injury suit against 3 tobacco companies. There was no explanation. A cold spell from Canada. Is this winter already? The front brought snow to Ohio and 4 other Midwestern states. Temperatures below freezing across the central and northern plains today. With some heartwarming thoughts now, here's John Chancellor with commentary tonight.
Thank you, Tom. Next January, George Bush will finish 1 term as president. And unless death intervenes, there will then be 5 former presidents, all alive. According to my calculations, we have had 5 living former presidents only once before, in 1861 when James Buchanan left the White House. We live in an age of one-term presidents. It wasn't always that way. During the 30 years that began in 1932, Americans lived through the presidencies of only 3 men: Roosevelt, Truman, and Eisenhower. 3 presidents during the Depression, the Second World War, and the important post-war years. In the next 30 years, however, Americans lived through the presidencies of 7 men. 6 of those presidencies were troubled. John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson was forced out by the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon had to resign. Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and George Bush were defeated. Only Ronald Reagan served 2 full terms, and his popularity isn't very high today. Aside from most of the Reagan years, it's been a jittery time for the presidency and a jittery time for the American people as presidents came and went. Half of the population grew up believing that presidents stayed in office for a long time. The other younger half of the population sees a revolving door in the Oval Office. That means our expectations of the presidency are lower. Presidencies don't seem as important as they once did, especially when there are now 5 of them around.
Thank you, John. Economic news now. Some of the nation's biggest retailers report sales last month were better than expected. Walmart had a 16% gain. JCPenney was up more than 7%. On Wall Street, this news helped push stocks higher today. Trading today was very heavy. It is an unusual combination of professions, professional football and the law, but then the man who has managed to do both is not your run-of-the-mill football player or lawyer. He only plays at the top. NBC's Mike Leonard tonight on the transition from Purple People Eater to Your Honor.
For a man who ran as hard as he did, the reaction to victory is uncharacteristically timid. Alan Page, tell us how you feel about being elected to the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Well, it's a little scary.
That from the Alan Page who once scared the daylights out of a huge constituency of pro football players. The Hall of Fame defensive tackle played 15 years, mostly with the Minnesota Vikings. Known for his brute strength and aggressiveness, he longed for the day when he could show off the powers of his intellect. So upon retirement, he went to work as a lawyer in private practice, then as Assistant Attorney General. In August, he won a lawsuit to place his name on the ballot for the state Supreme Court, a position usually filled by political appointees. Page's success in opening the process opened him to the sneering comments of those who still believed in the stereotypical image of the dumb jock.
I've learned that life can be ugly and that people can be small.
Compared to a sizable man who decided to run in a state that had never elected a black person to the higher court. That void, says Page, gave people of color
the perception that the system was unfair.
And your election would at least
in some small way begin to change that perception.
A cause that drove Alan Page all around the state, campaigning alone in front of business groups, TV news audiences, high school students, all the standard political stops.
Success doesn't just happen.
He kept stressing educational reform, while they kept asking for autographs and football predictions.
But ask him to boil things down and give the people of Minnesota a 2 or 3 sentence summary of who he is besides a former football player.
That's the problem. There is no 2 or 3. There is no short answer to that. For me to talk about who I am, you'll never have enough airtime.
A 6-year term should help fill in the blanks. Mike Leonard, NBC News, Minneapolis.
Good luck. Thank you.
That's Nightly News for Thursday. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you tomorrow night.